Good morning, and welcome to another inspiring episode of the Good Morning Minute, where we start the day with purpose, passion, and a little bit of power. I'm your host, Angelina Mojica, and today's conversation is part of our special series in partnership with the Empower Her Steps virtual conference, a movement rooted in helping women rise, heal, and walk boldly into the life God designed for them. Our mission is simple but powerful, empowering life purpose, because we believe that when a woman finds clarity in her calling, everything changes for her family, her community, and the generations to come. So friends, grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and get ready to be inspired as we jump into real stories, honest lessons, and bold steps towards purpose with our guest today. Our guest is Tabitha. Tabitha, welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. We're so happy to have you here. I'm happy to get to know you better through our conversation. Yeah, and just kind of before we get started, I would like to just take a moment for you to just kind of share a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Tabitha. I would live in Arizona, not by choice. We were stationed here in the military, and then we just decided to stay. I have three young children. I homeschool all of them. I have written a book that was released in January called Jesus in Therapy. So I really work in the mental health and faith space where we really try to break down a lot of the misconceptions regarding believers who struggle with their mental health, especially. I grew up in a church where mental health was not accepted. It led me to a suicide attempt by the time I was 15 years old. Grew up in a household full of abuse. So I've had to walk through a lot of healing and a lot of struggle. And now I'm at a place where I get to use that story and share it with other people. So that's really my heart and passion.
Wow. And so something about letting the truth set you free when you're able to really understand your story and how it has impacted you. It's a beautiful almost release, and the image that comes to mind as I'm saying this are just like a little butterflies just kind of flying up. But it is so important to understand your story so that you can empower others through your own empowerment. So I can't wait to get into the conversation. Before we do so, I'd like to start off with just a fun icebreaker just to kind of get us in the flow of things. And so my question, Tabitha, to you is, if today had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh man, I feel like it's Survivor a little bit. I'm a survivor.
All right.
that's, a,
Yes.
that's a
Okay.
little bit the stage
Destiny's
of life I'm in.
Child. Okay. I see that. There was times in my life where I had that was my anthem. So I
Mhm.
can definitely get it. All right. Well, hey, let's go ahead and just kind of jump into the heart of our conversation. And so my first question to you is, what was the defining moment of pain or challenge in your life, and how did it impact you?
Well, having grown up in really complex trauma, unfortunately, there were many defining moments of pain. And I think kind of the culmination would have been, my attempted suicide. I was 15 years old. It was on a Sunday morning, directly following a church service. I sat in the service and cried the entire service, and not one person asked me if I was okay or came up and talked to me. And it had, been following just years and years of church abuse and, abuse in my home life. And that was, I walked out knowing I was never going to see any of them again. And it was shortly after, I think, kind of rock bottom was getting locked in a psych ward on suicide watch, after my first attempt and then an attempt with cutting. It was like, you need to be somewhere where you're safe. And so being in the psychiatric hospital at 16, just away from all of my family, still just, I realized at that point what a child I was. And now looking back, having a daughter that's almost exactly the same age as I was when I went through it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was such a little baby and I was so terrified, and it was so dark and no one could come and save me and no one was there with me but Jesus. And so it was such a sobering, like rock bottom moment of like, I can't stay here. Like I didn't have the autonomy to leave, family relationships or the toxic situations I was in. I didn't fully
Mhm.
have the freedom yet to get myself out of those situations, but I was like, I've got to do everything I can to heal and make this better and find a way to climb out of this.
Mhm. That is, that's really heavy, but I also appreciate the vulnerability in just saying, this did happen to me. And oh man, being 15 years old, I think for those that are listening that have come out of childhood trauma, myself included, like I get it. And it's such a place of vulnerability because you know something isn't right
Mhm.
and you feel it. Sometimes it's to the detriment of your own self. Talking about suicide and cutting and self-harm and those things, and you're looking for a way out, and there's just no one in tune with your cry for help, and you almost feel like you're alone in the matter, and you're there.
You're looking at all the adults in your life and they're all the ones causing harm. So that's, who you're looking to for guidance and protection. It's like, nope, not here.
Yeah, and then it just kind of shifts like your perspective on any adult person, because then you're like, oh my gosh, can I trust anybody, right? Any adult, because we always tell the kids, like, if somebody's hurting you, please come and tell an adult, a teacher,
Yeah.
stuff. But and this is important because I work with kids in the foster care system, and um, it's important because some foster parents just don't understand that trust is broken at that relationship level. And so for it to be restored, you have to rebuild the trust at relationship level. And it's
Mhm.
hard when trauma's, on the surface, because you have a child that's like, I don't trust you, I don't like you, I don't want you, pushing that love away. And as a person that is trying to bring healing, it's a road, it's a hard road. So let's look at that. So you're 15 years old and you're coming to this realization that I need to fix this, and your only person there is you. And then of
Yeah.
course spiritually, you mentioned Jesus always being there with you, and he
Mhm.
being your rock. So walk us through what that looked like as you're coming to this realization of turnaround. um, what did that look like for yourself?
Um, I remember just being implicitly aware that I didn't have a lot of choices yet. I knew that one day I'd be able to fully save myself, but I knew it wasn't going to be yet. I couldn't raise myself. I couldn't. One of the most important things I did was really, I had a stipulation that as long as I was under my mom's roof, I needed to go to church. And this particular church that had caused so much abuse and wounding, I'm like, it will not be here anymore. I will go somewhere else, but it's not going to be here. And that was a really hard line I had to draw when I got out is this, I'm never going to heal in this environment. And then it was still a couple of years of like just a lot of wandering, a lot of unraveling, with all the physical and narcissistic and emotional abuse I experienced with my father. It still took a couple years for that relationship to completely implode, and he disowned me right about at 18. And so it really was a process of relationships breaking down and me removing myself where I could, and really having grown up in a church but that was so unhealthy and with so much abuse. Everything I knew about Jesus, about adults, everything that was projected onto God because of my relationships with adults, it was all false. Like none of it was biblical, none of it was true. So it was like my entire sense of self and being and self beliefs were just shattered. And so I had to let that happen. And that I think is one of the scariest, most painful parts of healing, of when you're just free falling and you have no idea where you're going to land, who will still be there when you do. It's just this completely out of control feeling because you're not in control and everything you knew is gone. And so I had to just let myself be burned down to ash and rebuild so slowly, but being so careful who I let in that process of rebuilding. Because I'm like, if you're the one who broke me, I'm going to not invite you into this next phase of my life. And so that's something I've continued to build in my adulthood, probably in the last like 10 years of really doing heavy like EMDR and just a lot of inner child healing, is just like my circle is so tight and I am so particular about who I will trust to be have that closest access to me, because that's been abused so many times in my life. I now just guard it like you would not believe, where I'm just like, no, you're not the one. I have like incredible discernment about people, and I'm not untrusting. I feel like I am very vulnerable and very authentic, but if you're going to get let into the closest level of my life, you better have earned that trust, and walking in a way where you're speaking life into me, and where you're a good person in my life. And it doesn't mean that there's never going to be accountability, or you're never going to call me out, but I invited you into that place in my life to do that, because I trust you, because you're not just looking for everything that's wrong with me. You're seeing the good in me, speaking the good into me. So then I trust when something comes up and you're like, I trust you to have that place in my life. And so I've just very carefully curated the circle I have now and the life I have now, because I had no choices for so long, and I couldn't control who I was surrounded by. And so part of my rebuilding has been being so careful about who I let into that inner circle now.
Mm. And that's so important, because as children of coming from traumatic places or hard places, that's one of the survival skills that we really refine, is how to read people, and to
Yeah.
really look at intention behind, a smile. And so, that's a skill that serves us well when you talk about discernment, because
Mm-hmm.
you've learned to tune into that for sure. But I think
Yeah.
it's important what you're saying here is, like, you were burnt down to ash. And some people can look at that and be like, wow, I have nothing, and then internalize that as a message of I am nothing, right? But
Yeah.
if you look at it from a growth perspective, you are tilling the soil so that you can rebirth, right? You can come anew. And so you are looking to piece together the things that will serve you in the goals that you have set for yourself. So
Right.
it's a very lonely and scary place, especially someone so young, and realizing that the people that are in your even immediate circle, your family, right, can be so hurtful, and to learn how to put boundaries up in those regards too. And
Mm-hmm.
as you get older, you're able to escape. And unfortunately, you were thrown out, is what I heard, by your dad at 18.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that too hurt you, in the sense of you feeling rejected,
Yeah.
um, not wanted, and all those things. So those are just other things that you're having to deal with, and come to a realization. But you did talk about how all these were untruths. So even those messages that were sent to you, through those experiences, were untruths, because that's not who God intended you to be, right? So what was it to help you heal, and what was it that helped you grow as you're walking through this phase of life?
Well, it's really interesting. So some people, assume that I was not a Christian, through all of this abuse and all this childhood stuff, but I was. And that's what was so detrimental, is that so much of the harm was being done in God's name. So not only was my, perspective of adults and, flawed, and the world around me flawed, but literally the only thing I had left, I, was Jesus. And I was just like, this can't be who he is. So it was just, all of it was broken down. And so it was really the process of rebuilding really, really included Jesus and therapy, because I had to lean so heavily on my faith. Because I think when you don't have that perspective of this pain can be used for purpose, and it will be redeemed, and it can become something good, even though everyone around me meant it for harm, it's really hard to be resilient if you don't have that mindset. And what you were talking about before, that's how I had to look at it. It wasn't I was nothing, it was I was a blank canvas. Like, I get to start all over again. And in some ways that's depressing, because it's like I feel like everyone else that didn't have all this complex trauma, got a very different starting line than I did, because I had to go all the way back and start over and
Mhm.
reteach myself all these things about life and God and the world around me and adults. And so it took me a lot longer to grow, but I knew that as long as I had the willingness to always learn something new, to always be okay with that was wrong, and be okay being wrong, and finding out what the truth was, and always digging for the truth, and always seeking that growth, I knew that I would come around. And so that was what most of my healing journey was really intensive therapy. And I grew up in the church where I was not allowed to go to therapy. It was wrong. It's something to do with your faith. All the messages were, there's something wrong with me, and I'm not doing something right. And so after the suicide attempt, it was finally like, maybe you can go to counseling. I'm like, good call. And so I started that process, and that, that was so intensive. I mean, I was 15, I'm almost 42, and it's been a lifelong journey of healing and digging. And I have really heavily relied on my faith because that's what gives me the perspective that I have about the pain. That's what gives me peace when my circumstances leave no room for me to have peace. That's what gives me the perspective of my wounds being turned into wisdom and being okay with that. Like when I was going through it, I was like, I don't want to be going through this. I never wish this on anyone. And I would have never wanted to go through it again. And I still wouldn't choose it for myself, but being able to see everything good that came from it, all the wisdom I have, all the tools I have to now teach my children so I don't repeat so many of those cycles. Like there's been so much good that has come out of it that was really equal parts, I think, my faith and then all the hard work I did through counseling and therapy.
Wow. And I kind of want to look because you mentioned Jesus also being something that helped, grow you and heal you. And I find it interesting that that was still intact because some of your trauma, most of the trauma came from the religious lens and perspective. What was it that kept faith intact? Because that's what I'm hearing is like your faith did not shudder, it did not shatter. It like,
I think it did. I think it was rebuilt and it was
okay.
rebuilt stronger on what was true because before my faith was in people. My faith was in a religious establishment. My faith was
Right.
in leaders that pretended they were God and that they alone could hear from God for me. And it took away like the middleman. I blew out of
Mhm.
church for years. I had to step away just for a really long time to recover from that church hurt and separate Christ from Christianity and really be like, who is Jesus to me? What does the Bible say he is? Not this, what these flawed people are showing me and
Yeah.
all this harm that they're inflicting in his name. Like, who is he really? And so it forced me to not hear from anyone else but for myself. And that's continued my whole relationship with the Lord as an adult is I'll hear you, trust but verify. Like I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna dig into the words and the meanings and the culture and the context and the original language, and I'm gonna do the work for myself to make sure it's true. And but there was just something inside of me, I think, even though my whole belief in Christianity was shattered, there was just this very, very small part that was deeply buried that was just like, that can't be it. Like that can't be all there is,
Mhm.
and that can't be what it really means. And I was so wounded, I couldn't step back into it for years. I couldn't step into it without just having that lens where I'm just looking for all the flaws and all the offense and all the sins of other people. And it took a long time for me to rebuild that to where my faith is not in people, my faith is not in man. I can step into any church now and I have tremendous discernment, I think, about if it is an unhealthy environment.
Mhm.
But I have these boundaries and I have this understanding where I will never allow myself to be put in those same situations again. I don't allow people to speak over my life if they don't have a certain position in my life. I am very careful about, who I surround myself with, like I said. And so it was something where I do think it was just shattered to pieces, but I was able to pick up the right pieces and put it back
Mhm.
together because I think everything up till then was an illusion and it wasn't from Jesus. And so I think I developed a really raw, authentic relationship with who God actually is, not who everyone was pretending he was in my life.
Mhm. I think that what you're saying about relationship over religion is very important when it comes to understanding who God is in your life. Like for me, it's very individualized because God's going to tell me what I need to change. He'll convict me through those things of, this is not the path I have for you. So, let's pivot and go another direction. But it is very personal and it is me knowing who he is, knowing truth and opening up myself for that communication through prayer, through, meditation, worship, all the things that I do to connect to him in spirit so that he can guide me in the decisions I make and those things. And church is definitely something that a lot of us lean into. But like you said, and in the Bible it says, know who you follow. too.
Yeah,
So, you have to step into those situations very carefully and have good discernment when you're stepping
right.
into those situations as well. Um,
Yeah,
so as you're going through this healing journey and you're discovering yourself again, you're discovering kind of who you are, and then you get a sense that there's some purpose behind it. What was that like? And what did you discover?
I remember the very first time it happened. I was still a teenager, so I was very much still in it. But another teenager in the church, her father had died in a really horrific way, and so she became suicidal. And the only person that she came and talked to was me because she knew that I understood her pain. And I was like, just getting that first glimpse, because I knew how stubborn I was. I didn't want to hear from people that had their lives all pieced together. And I'm like, what do you know about my trauma and my pain? Like, you can't speak into this, you know? And I think there's like that resistance when people are going through really dark time. You're just like, yeah, okay. It's really easy to, and maybe it's wrong, but I've done this my whole life just to brush off people that really don't seem to have a firm grasp of what that pain and trauma feels like. So their advice just feels really hollow because it's like, you don't know how to survive this. Um, and so that first time someone came to me and was like, you get this, so I'm just going to talk to you. I was like, And then it's been this very slow build my whole life. I just went to this big Christian counselors conference and I was talking to someone on the executive board and I'm like, I have no ABCs following my name. I have no credentials, but I have this lived experience that invites people in and makes them feel like they can share their pain and share their story. And I've watched it happen my whole life
Mhm.
because I have that empathy, because I have the understanding of what it's like to be that dark and see no other escape, because I have walked through some of the darkest trials, that it's really hard sometimes to open up to people that just they'll say well-meaning things but they just don't know. And so I've watched how God has allowed my understanding of pain to open the door for other people that maybe wouldn't share it with someone else, especially in a church setting, because it's really scary and you guard that pain. And when you've had a lot of bad experiences with maybe Christians just saying really stupid cookie cutter things or throwing a Bible verse at you or just really just being dismissive, you after a certain amount of times you're like, I don't want to even try this anymore. Like, I'm just not going to tell them. So when people know that I get it and know that I've been there, it opens doors that I think in a lot of other circumstances wouldn't be opened. And so I have just so faithfully watched God turn around things that were just the worst moments of my life, and it became a tool that he could use to soften other people's hearts and open doors that would be jammed shut otherwise, and allow me to speak into people's lives that won't listen to anyone else. And that's been a beautiful part of kind of the sacred trust I've earned with this community of people, especially that struggle with mental health, is like, oh no, I know, like, I know how bad it is and I know how it feels, and I know that nothing else makes sense right now and you can't hear past all the noise, and I know that just telling you a Bible verse isn't going to meet you in your need right now. And so it really taught me how to step into people's pain and hold space for
Mhm.
it. And I think it's kind of a sacred gift that was really only earned through me going through that fire myself.
And I would agree. I would agree for you to truly be empathetic and compassionate in a situation. There has to be a connection of some sort, right? But I love that you're saying I've learned to sit in it with someone, because emotions are scary for a lot of people. So when it comes to like sadness and hurt and pain, just as someone that is just a regular person walking on the street, like our bodies try to avoid those situations. That's why we
Right.
have our fight, flight, and freeze moments. But we're intended to help walk people through it, and the only way to do it is to sit in it and not be like, oh, here's a box of tissues, or oh, here's a Bible verse, or here's this and that, because it's making you uncomfortable, right?
Exactly.
And so then you send a message to people and you're like, oh, well, then you can't handle where I'm at. You can't handle what I'm seeking. So I'm just gonna pack it all back up in and just walk
Mhm.
away, and you lose the ability to really testify to someone
And I think that's just
and
something
connect
as
with these people.
Christians that we
Yeah.
do. And I don't know why, but I think as Christians, we feel like we're the light of the world. We're supposed to have all the answers. And I'm like, there are some moments that are so sad and so dark, and grief that is so deep that nothing but your presence will minister to that person. And to be able to not be uncomfortable with tears and pain and feel like we got to push someone through it. Like, okay, but now, like, what could you do about this? Like, there's not always an immediate next step, and the sitting with people in the pain and letting them feel all the feelings. That's why, we talk about spiritual bypassing when we do these things where we're trying to get people to literally skip over their natural response and emotions and go straight to, just a spiritual go-to. It's like, don't do that. You won't really heal. You won't really face it. You have to feel it.
No, it's true, because then you're like sending that message of no, 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 brush that aside. That's not
Mhm.
important. This is what's important.
Right.
And yeah, you miss the ability to really, um, like I said, give your testimony and to connect someone to Jesus and to who he really is, and
Yeah.
just walk somebody basically to the altar, and
Yeah.
in a sense, it just to do that.
Yeah.
Um, so Tabitha, I'm curious, how has your story shaped who you are today?
Oh, in every possible way. I think probably the number one way would be my parenting. Because I think the only roadmap I felt like I had was everything not to do. But I was like, man, this is overwhelming, because there's, a very, very, very short list of anyone I want to go to and ask parenting advice from and in my life. And so I really had to lean so heavily on God and just figuring it out, because there wasn't like this is the healthy way to do this. It was like, you are going to be tried by fire and you're just going to have to learn in that moment. And so I think a lot of my healing journey was walked out purely because of my children. I always cared about it and I went to therapy from a very young age, but once I had kids and I started seeing triggers and things trickling out that I had not dealt with in the way that I thought I had after decades of therapy, I was like, I need to do something more intensive, and I need to do whatever I have to do for it to end with me. And so that was one of the most important motivators in everything that I did. I love to help everyone. I love to minister to everyone, but if I'm not doing right in my own house and I'm perpetuating cycles, like, that's all that matters to me. Everything else after that, yes, God use me, but use me in my primary form of ministry as a mother, like, make me healthy there. And so I have put all of the work into it so that my kids don't have to have a childhood they recover from. And that means more to me than anything. And then God opening all the doors and the book and the platform and anything else he gives me is just like, it's a gift, and I steward it and I take it very seriously. But if I'm not getting it right at home, like, none of that matters. And I had one of my parents with all of the abuse. He went on and got in some serious positions of leadership in, organizations against child abuse, and no one knowing his history and him hiding it all, lying about it all. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sit here and be preaching a message to someone and at home I'm not doing it, and I'm
Mm.
not that person. I'm going to be the same person every day of the week, wherever you find me. And so that was, I just wanted to be right, in the right with my own children, and be at peace in my own body, which is, I feel like, as a trauma survivor, one of the absolute hardest things. Like, silence just kills me. And so training myself to sit with it, that's how I've learned to sit with other people, because I couldn't sit with myself. I couldn't stand my own thoughts. I couldn't stand nighttime. I couldn't stand silence. I couldn't stand when the day finally, was winding down and I had nowhere else to run to and nothing else to keep myself busy. And so me learning to sit with my own pain and face it is how I can now hold that space for other people, because I didn't know how. And I know exactly how they feel, why they want to numb and run and avoid. Like, I know exactly what what that is like. And so it enables me to, I think, understand people in a deeper way.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Something about being, me too, a mother. Um, and when I teach parenting class, I tell my young moms, like, you parent from one or two ways. You either, hey,
Mhm.
what worked for me didn't kill me, so I'm gonna keep doing it, or you pivot an entire daily different direction and you do the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And that was true for me because as a child too, I felt like my voice was silenced. I grew up in that era of children are seen and not heard.
Yeah.
And so um, I remember being in family gatherings and all the children ushered to the back room, door closed, y'all stay here while we're all the adults over here. So, it was very much a message that I grew up with, but it is hard. And then when you become an adult and a parent yourself, you're like, okay, this is how I felt when things like that were happening to me. I do not want to pass that on to
Yeah.
my children. And so you try to make better choices and become better. But then you also realize that some of your trauma is still there too. I think I had that aha moment with my daughter when she got a little older. Um,
Yeah.
to realize that, oh, I got to get back to work. I got to really look at what this is. But then again, sitting in your own emotions, I think that's such a strength in itself because you become acquainted with what feelings are and emotions are. And that's like a superpower in a sense, because
Yeah.
then you can walk people through their own situations. Because again, we're always, as human beings, wanting to avoid what hurts us,
Yeah.
what brings us sadness. We're just genetically wired to want to avoid that, and everything in society tells us to. But to really embrace it, it helps us move past that moment and not carry it with us. Because
Well,
when we
healing just feels counterintuitive because you're like, why, like, I want to heal so it's better, like why do I feel worse? And so that's the thing that trips up so many people, like, I don't think I'm doing it right. It's like, no, you are. Like, it's good, it's gonna feel like you're breaking at first because you're stripping away old mindsets, old habits, generational patterns, and to face that takes an enormous amount of strength and resilience. And I even tell people, like, I'd have to take breaks in my seasons of EMDR because it's so intensive and you're just doing nothing but coming toe to toe with demons all the time. And you're like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, like it's exhausting. But I think for a parent to be willing to do that work so that that ends with them, like that's the
Mhm.
most powerful sacrificial kind of love. And I think that's the only thing that was able, when I didn't feel like the healing was worth it for myself, I knew they deserved it, whether I wanted to, whether I felt like it, whether it felt good. I knew it'd be worth it one day.
Mm, that's so beautiful. And so, Tabitha, what do you tell someone? Like, what kind of advice would you give someone who may be reaching out in that in between kind of, I don't know where to go? What kind of advice do you give that person?
Um, I always make sure that they have a solid support system. And sometimes the support system is Jesus and your therapist. Sometimes that's all I had. I've built in more people now, but I always make sure that they do have a solid present support system. And then I really encourage people that we don't see the whole picture. We see our pain because we're feeling it. So it is the most it has the most impact on us because it hurts us the most. And when you're facing that, it can feel like how many times I've wanted to throw in the towel. And you are going to start having little glimmers of light breakthrough, whether it's a moment where you realize you are able to respond in a better way to a trigger in a situation with one of your kids, whether
Mm.
someone comes up and asks you for advice and you realize, like, I'm not as screwed up looking as I thought. Like they can see that this is something that I know something about. And when you see that eventually it doesn't hurt as bad as it used to. And for me, that was a really big thing. When I went into some of my first therapy sessions, it's like 1 to 10, what's your disturbance level? I'm like 10, 10, 10, like everything's a 10, like it's all the worst. It's all deeply triggering, it all upsets me. And to get to the point where I was like able to think of those things, step back into those moments, face those memories, and not crumble, like that was so empowering. The fact that I can face things that were such tremendous triggers
Mhm.
and now be like it's okay. There are so many moments of healing when the light starts breaking through and you start realizing this is worth it, the pain, this is worth the discomfort, because it won't always be like that. You will get to another side of it. And yes, it's layers. Yes, you always peel back. And that's one of the hardest things about healing is you've worked so hard on this thing, and then 5 years later, you're like this is still bothering me, and things will come up. But it is just a patient process with yourself. And I think when you come from really complex trauma, it's an unbecoming process. You're stripping away all of the things you had to do to survive. And that was one of the most interesting parts for me, is the person I built to survive, because no one but me would protect me, lovingly releasing that version of myself. And that's a process that I've done a lot of in the last 5 years. I want to see that person in me, that little girl that had to fight so hard and be so grown up, and I want to tell her, you don't need to do that anymore. And there's so many beautiful moments in healing, and that I feel like I don't even know if I'd say there's an in between. It's an always undoing and becoming. You're always unraveling what was wrong, what was wounded, what was hurt, and you're blossoming and you're growing and you're blooming and you're becoming. And so it's all of life. All of life is that journey. And so I think that I would get discouraged if I thought like, now I'm in the middle, now I'm in the middle. I'm like, the whole I have to find joy in the journey. The whole thing is a journey, and it's going to happen my whole life. And I'm going to keep on moving forward, and I'm going to keep on stripping away. And I'm just going to keep on lovingly releasing those versions of myself that were so necessary. And they tried so hard to keep me safe, but I'm okay now. You can be free. And just that slowly, it's a beautiful, part of healing.
Oh, and I love how you're so appreciative of what that was for you, because you're right. That was your mechanism to go to keep you safe, keep you preserved, and
Mm,
you appreciate that, but then you're like, okay, it's time to release that part of me. And
yeah.
um it's almost like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, right? And you were wrapped up so tight in this preservation of self through the things that you needed to do to survive. And now you can shed that part of yourself so that you can truly walk into who you are meant to be, with
Yeah.
truth and transparency and authenticity. So I
Mhm.
love that. I love how you're highlighting it. Such a beautiful thing. Um,
Yeah.
and so I ask you, Tabitha, what does living with purpose look like for you now?
Um, it looks like telling the truth, first of all, because that was really, really hard in the beginning.
Mhm.
I was so, I mean, legitimately threatened, but um, everyone else benefited from my silence. So
Mhm.
me being willing not out of a vindictiveness, but to tell the truth about what I experienced and what my life was like. You can't you can't heal from what you won't name and what you won't face. And so that was a really important thing for me. So I am unapologetically truthful about what my experiences and my life have been like, because I had to hide it for so long. I really try to look at everything through the lens of my faith and through looking for purpose, because I really, really believe you'll find whatever you're looking for. If I'm looking for the wounding and where I'm still stuck and what I haven't gone past yet, like I will continually be hard on myself in a state of discouragement. But if I'm always looking for that little bit of growth, for that little bit of light that shined in, for that next moment where I see the realization of my healing, it helps me to keep going. So really training my mind to find the good and to find the growth and then keep seeking it surrounding myself with like-minded people has been very important, because there are people that benefit from you being stuck. And you will find that you just inherently have to shed relationships as you outgrow people in situations, and you will no longer tolerate certain things. And there is kind of a breaking away and being repositioned, and that's really painful. Actually, it was been really hard for me to be okay letting people fall off and letting people go, because in that, abused child mindset, I'll fight for everyone, please love me, don't leave me, but realizing I was the one outgrowing them, they weren't leaving me, and being okay with that, and being okay with this person does not go with me. And that has been a really big adjustment in healing, is that I don't chase people anymore. And now I just look for how I can shine a light, how I can be a lighthouse to help other people not hit those same rocks that I hit. How, if my 25 years in therapy can just help someone, just give them a little bit of a roadmap, and even just one area of their life where I had to go through the jungle with a machete and clear a path that no one had cleared before me. If I can now tell people, oh, this helped, or this is the way that, and just give them some encouragement. Healing is such an individual journey, but I feel like there's still a lot of just core things that are true for all of us. And so any way that I can help people, because I felt so alone, I can help people feel not so alone, know that they're not doing anything wrong. If it hurts, it means you're facing it, and you're walking through it. You're not like you're ruminating on the hurt, but you're facing it and walking through it. And you're finding, how can I use what happened to me for good somehow? How can I turn this into wisdom, not bitterness? And so always looking, and having a perspective to grow, to move forward, to help others, and knowing you're worth the healing. No, I think I grew up with so much self-loathing. I really didn't think I was worth having a full life, having a life with joy. And I wouldn't work on it because I didn't believe I was worth the effort. And so finally, I think seeing myself through my kids' eyes, and understanding, that little girl is still inside of me too. When I look at my daughter and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, she doesn't deserve for me to hate her. Like, she deserves to have a chance at this. Even now as a 40-year-old, like, I'm going to give her that. And so, I think so much of healing is just that perspective, because you can find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for the purpose, if you're looking for the lessons, if you're looking for the growth, you'll find them.
That's so beautiful. Well, I mean, as we start kind of closing out our conversation, I want to ask you a question that I ask many of my guests on the show, and it's one of legacy and impact. If today were your last day, what would you want to be remembered for?
I think I'd want to be remembered for being Jesus with skin on, for being able to love people in their pain and meet them there and not run away from it.
We are the hands and feet if we so choose to be, that's for sure. All right. Well, my last question, Tabitha, for you is, if you could leave a word of truth or encouragement with someone listening today who's still trying to figure out what their life purpose is, what would it be?
One, I think we can't find our purpose if we're not aligned with the one who made us. So I don't think I would have ever truly walked in my full healing. I think I could have done every mental health thing and every tool and every therapy. And if I hadn't come back to a knowledge of who God was, I wouldn't know who I am. So I think that's the most important thing, is to find your center. And that became my true north, and everything else falls in line after that. I know as long as he goes before me, everything else will fall in line. And so just always chasing after truth, and always chasing after just making sure I'm staying rooted in my faith, and because that tells me who I am, and then that helps me know how to interact in the world and who I want to be, and it's everything that I'm aiming for. And so I think just keeping your eyes on Jesus is my most important thing.
I love it. Well, Tabitha, let's say somebody's out there listening and they're like, you know what, I'd really like to get to know Tabitha a little bit more, maybe purchase her book. Where can they find you? How can they connect?
Yep. Well, I'm really active on both Instagram and Facebook. On Facebook, I'm the Redeemed Mama Tabitha Yates. On Instagram, I'm Tabitha Yates author. My book is on Amazon, Jesus and Therapy, Bridging the Gap Between Faith and Mental Health. And you can find it wherever books are sold. And I'd love to connect, and you can reach out and message me anytime.
Wonderful. Well, Tabitha, I want to say thank you for sharing your heart, your story, and your light with us today. Conversations like this remind us that purpose is not about perfection. It's about showing up, growing through what we go through, understanding and trusting that every step matters. Here at the Good Morning Minute and through the Empower Her Steps movement, we believe every woman has a calling worth discovering and a voice worth using. So friend, wherever you are today, remember your purpose is powerful and you're not walking alone. So until next time, keep rising, keep trusting, keep walking boldly into the life God has designed for you. I am Angelina Mojica, your life coach, sending you much love, much peace, many blessings.